Florida State has moved to potentially pursue leaving the ACC. Friday morning, the Board of Trustees for Florida State met, Blake, and they're going to figure out a way to get out of the ACC. Now, this is going to be a very long legal process, something that you are familiar with, but they are of the belief that the additions of SMU, Stanford, Cal were not improving the competitive environment within the Atlantic Coast Conference. And now here we are. Are they going to the Big Ten? Are they going to the SEC? This whole thing's a freaking mess. Look, the whole big thing, and I said this after they got pushed out of the playoff, like this sets them up to try and find a way out. And this might be the end of the ACC.
I don't think it's the end of the ACC. Florida State leaving isn't the end of the ACC.
Did we say that, though, about USC and UCLA when they did this?
That is true. Okay, but they're not out of the ACC yet. Okay, you still have Miami, you still have Clemson, you still have both Duke and North Carolina that are there.
Well, that's what I'm trying. This is what I think is going to end up happening.
Tobacco Row is what they call the Carolinas, I might add.
Right. It feels as though that this opens the door for a lot of these other teams then pursue departures from the conference. And if Florida State leaves, what incentivizes North Carolina and Clemson and the rest of the teams that are in the conference, I don't think are really going to be as desired to leave or to be sought after by some of these other conferences. But Miami, Florida State, Clemson are the big dogs, and I don't see a reason why they wouldn't try to leave if Florida State does end up jumping.
Let me just say this. Let me tell you my first initial thought to all this. Number one, the lawyers on both sides of this are about to get paid. Barrett Sallee, our guest we just had on.
Yeah.
Dude, the Harvey Specters, if you've ever watched Suits, the Harvey Specters, the Louis Litz of the world are about to make a crap load of money. They're the real winners in all this. But let me just say this. While I'm a little bit skeptical on the ACC not, deteriorating like the Pac, because people still care about the ACC, believe it or not. There are still people that care that, in the southeastern part of this country of what their school does. I still think this is going to be a long legal battle, and I don't know how it's going to shake out. I think ultimately Florida State is going to want to and try to pay to get out. But I don't know if any conference is going to add just one of them, which could lead to them trying to get SEC or Big Ten to grab somebody else. But I feel like that Florida State, which this cuts deeper than the playoff thing. This was going on before the playoff thing even happened. Yeah. This started in the beginning of the year.
Right.
That they were talking about this. I think it's the ultimate dagger, that they did not get in. But in my opinion, it's not the ACC's fault that they didn't get into the playoff. Like multiple things can be true at once. You could you're not happy with the money you're not making. You're not making $25 to $30 more million in the SEC schools and the Big Ten schools. That's completely fair. I understand it from a business standpoint. Well, then you shouldn't have signed the contract to stay in the ACC.
Well, that was so long ago, though. That wasn't even that recently that they signed. It's a very long contract that they signed, and it was long enough ago where back when they were not far removed from winning a national championship that it made sense for them to stick around. But now we're in this position where it really doesn't make any sense. And part of what they brought up was how the next time around when they go back to renegotiate their next TV rights deal, the bargaining power that they have, the negotiating power that they have with whatever media entity that they go to, it's going to be significantly diminished. It's really going to be hurt. I don't think that Stanford or Cal draw eyes. Maybe SMU does a little bit, but none of those programs
SMU
really help them.
I think SMU is the sneaky best addition that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I think that from Florida State's perspective, it doesn't move the needle. Here's what I will say, though, what factors into wherever Florida State ends up going. They're pissed off at ESPN. They absolutely are pissed off at ESPN. ESPN has more control over the college football playoff than the general public is led on to believe.
You think they're going to the Big Ten?
I think that makes the most sense because also from the Big Ten perspective, they are geographically trying to spread themselves out to a position where now if you control possibly two teams in the South, if they pull another team with Florida State, the regionality of the Big Ten is that of a national conference.
It makes no sense. Could you imagine Florida State flying from Tallahassee to Seattle, Washington to play a softball game?
Well, let's remove that for a second because, like, I really think that
okay, hold on though.
Yeah.
Can we remove that? Because that's a very realistic thing. That ultimately, Joe, that is the thing. Like, not only are you flying there, you know what else you got to do? You got to get equipment up there. There's some, and by the way, all the gear, like, you know how every team normally, you know, like when I walk into a college football stadium, the opposing team has an 18-wheeler that they drove in days ago to get all the gear there. You're going to let somebody drive from Tallahassee to Seattle, Washington for a football game? I mean, can it happen? Will it happen? Okay, sure. But that's on a regular basis. The Big Ten makes no sense to me whatsoever. If they're going to do this, they got to go to the SEC.
What I would throw this in there, though, that by the time that the Big Ten adds two more schools, they have enough teams on the East Coast to split the division down, the conference down the middle into two divisions. And like, we don't, the reason why I said that
you're going to split them into two divisions just because of Florida State? And who's
the
I
think competitively, I think it makes the conference more entertaining. They're literally building their own mini NFL with the amount of teams that are in the conference and the amount of representation that they have in the conference to have an East and a West division that is literally East and West, not what it was previously like before, where it was just the teams that were a little bit more Eastern in the middle of the country and a little bit more Western in the middle of the country. You've got Maryland, you've got Rutgers. I don't think that there's a limited representation on the eastern part of the country that you couldn't split it down the middle and limit the amount of West Coast trips. But I get what you're saying, but wouldn't the SEC be incentivized to keep them out because of the recruiting that comes into this year where they wouldn't want another recruiting competitor in Florida?
No, they don't care about that. I mean, they got two in Mississippi. They got two in Alabama. They just brought another one in for Texas A&M in Texas. They just brought Texas in, and A&M's in the same state. They brought in Oklahoma.
Yeah, but they only had one team really in that region.
I don't think it would matter. I think – okay, so I agree with what they're doing from a business expense. I don't agree with them for paying – if they have to pay over $500 million, I think that's stupid, okay?
Well, not if they're the ones – not paying it. If it's private equity,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it comes from. You know why? Because what happens if you get in a jam and you need to go to Boosters for money? And here's another thing. You're having to pay that to the ACC. So, you know, you just asked me a question why I thought the ACC wouldn't go down. Joe, you're about it. Let's just say Florida State leaves. Let's just say for whatever. Let's say they settle and they have to pay $250 million to leave. Okay, whatever it is. Joe, the bottom line is you're giving a conference at minimum $250,000 to leave. They're not going anywhere.
Well, wait, but the same thing kind of happens here with the Pac-12 where they're sitting on $400 million.
But nobody was giving them $500 million to go somewhere. It wasn't happening. What I'm saying is, and to your point, I still think that it's a great business move because you're not, you know, obviously you're not getting the extra $30 million a year, and you'd be playing a long game to gain that back. I understand that. But in reference to what conference you need to go into, okay, the SEC is the only logical sense. Your closest away game, what is it, Jersey? Rutgers? That's the closest away game you might have? What's another big
3-hour flight? That's a 3-hour flight.
Joe,
Maryland is closer. Wait. Maryland's
a 3-hour drive to Miami, whatever that is. I don't know what. Maybe it's longer than that. I'm sure it's longer than that.
Yeah,
but it's not a massive difference. They're not that far away from Atlanta and playing Georgia Tech. It makes no logical sense for them to go anywhere else. Here's the thing: they can be mad at ESPN. They can be mad at the ACC. Good on them. I don't hate them for doing that, but Joe, I swear to God, if I see something else about from the Florida fan base about Kirk Herbstreit, or if I see something else from their fan base about the ACC screwing them, I'm just like, make the move then, man. Make the move. Now, I think that Jim Phillips did a good job today. You know, I was reading a lot of the stuff Dellinger and those guys are putting out. I stand with you. If you want to do it, I stand with you. That's your decision. But let's not act like there's not one decision that you got to make and where you need to go. Now, I will say too, I think they know where they go. They're not going to leave without knowing where they're going.
Well, I'm sure that I saw that floated out there, and I think that it's a statement that makes sense, but I think it's less of they know which conference they've picked and they know which one they're going to be playing in, rather than it's probably more likely they've spoken to entities in both conferences, and they know that there's at least mutual interest from both conferences. But I get what you're saying, that they're not going to leave and just hope that somebody wants them. They're not going to pull a San Diego State and try to jump to the Pac-12 and then realize too late it doesn't work.
They played the hokey pokey with the Pac-12.
But they're not
name in. They put their name out.
They're not San Diego State though. They're one of the largest national brands in the country with one of the biggest fan bases in Florida.
Sure.
They'll have their pick. They'll be able to decide where they want to go. And I think that they're probably going to weigh their options. And I still believe that they're going to lean in the Big Ten's direction because of that capability to stick it to ESPN in a way.
You know what they could have done too? Because they're going to make a crap load of money from the playoff, right? You're about to run a conference. And the truth is, Joe, the next decade, you can make the playoff maybe every time. You could make the playoff every time and make that money back that you're missing out on. I mean, I know you still would have a situation where you're not making $30 million more than the other schools, but I get it. I just, I'm so tired, Joe. Let me end it with this on my thought. I'm just so fucking tired of realignment. I'm so tired of realignment talks. I'm so tired of all of it that, you know what? It makes me want to scream. And you know what else makes me want to scream? I agree with them on one massive point. The one massive point I agree with them on is that college football gets dictated to. They don't do the dictating. What do I mean by that? Roger Goodell could walk into CBS's office and drop his nuts on the table and said, "You're going to pay me what we tell you to pay us." And CBS really doesn't have a leg to stand on, right? No. Like they can only pay what they can pay, and I understand that. But college football, for example, for the NFL, they have Amazon Prime, Fox, ESPN, CBS, all of them paying them money. College football is not like, for example, my school LSU is not going to be on NBC. Right? Like it will never be on NBC unless, God forbid, they play Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock can't score a touchdown. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you get what I'm saying? Like this furthermore proves a point to me that this game needs a commissioner.
Well, okay, so
somebody running college football, because you talk about the Wild West. Joe, we keep talking about every single day. Oh, I figured out what we need to talk about. The two-time transfer portal thing. Did you see that today, that you can just transfer twice and it doesn't matter? Like you could
wait, they changed that?
Yeah, it got passed. The NCAA said we're not fighting it. So dudes can just transfer twice and it doesn't matter. Anyway,
That's
either
stupid.
way.
Really stupid.
Okay. You need somebody that can make decisions instead of ESPN dictating in these TV networks dictating what they can and can't do. ESPN and CBS and Fox single-handedly have done what they wanted to in college football, and it's had no repercussions. Zero. Nobody. They are killing the sport, and there's no repercussions to it.
Well, because it's pitting these conferences to negotiate against one another, and I think that. Right. Look, the problem, the reason why realignment's bad is not because we are filtering out the weak links within the sport. It's because this is turning into such a slow waging legal battle. And this is something that we're never really going to see in pro sports. We were far too young or not alive when there were mergers going on between the AFL and the NFL, and what happened when the USFL came around. All that other stuff, all of that crap is nothing that we've ever been exposed to. And the NFL is going to ride, into the night, into glory, because they have established themselves as the true entity. But right now, because there's so many independently operating pieces here, there's going to be so much of this for the next decade. And I think that the only way that we get away from this, and that if we have a commissioner for college football, is if it's under one large conference. That's the only way, or two large conferences that coexist together. That's the only way that we're going to get it, because there's no way that 3 or 4 different Power 5 conferences are going to be able to converse and cooperate consistently. It's just too much of a mess.
You could have somebody overseeing transfer portal, NIL, and being able to be the voice to
the NCAA is never going to elect that. So that what we need is a singular conference to elect it.
But the NCAA doesn't have to. You know what the conferences could do? The conferences could form could form an alliance.
But they don't have an incentive to do that, though. That's the problem.
They do have an incentive. You know what their incentive?
What is it? What's the incentive?
Their incentive is it single-handedly overnight, if you have a collective bargaining agreement type of situation, NIL and the portal is over with.
I just don't think that the current conference commissioners are going to agreeably.
It wouldn't be up to them. Guess who Greg Sankey works for?
The teams.
It's the same for Roger Goodell. If you remember when Goodell, we're going way too long in this segment, but remember when Goodell did not want a team in Las Vegas, and it was Jerry Jones telling him, I'm getting all these, we're moving there and there's nothing you could do about it. He dictated it to him. Okay. These presidents of these universities, they can dictate things if they want to.
I get that, but I just feel like if these conferences would much rather slow play it, especially the SEC specifically would much rather slow play this.
Yeah,
because they know that everyone's going to converge on them. I mean, Florida State's literally leaving so that they have an opportunity to possibly join the SEC. And then you've got Clemson and Miami waiting behind them. They are in no rush to do anything. The slower they wait for everyone to collapse and come to them, the more power and money that goes to that conference and to the brand that is the SEC.
Fair.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.